Have you ever prayed with everything in you, only to get up and wonder why nothing seems different? You pray for peace, but your mind is still racing. You pray for direction, but you're still uncertain. You pray for your family, but the situation hasn't changed. Then you ask yourself the question, Lord, why do I still feel this way after praying? If you've ever wrestled with that question, I want you to stay with me today because I believe many people have walked away from prayer feeling discouraged because they expected something to change immediately and it didn't. Waiting between your prayer and God's answer can be one of the hardest places to live. You know God hears you. You believe He's able. But when you look around, everything appears the same. The problem is still there. The door hasn't opened. The relationship hasn't been restored. The opportunity hasn't come. Even your emotions seemed unchanged. And you're not the first person to pray honestly while wondering where God is. Listen to the words of David. In Psalm chapter 13, verse 1, David says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" David brought his questions to God. He told God exactly what he was feeling. Sometimes we forget that prayer is an invitation into a relationship with the one who already knows what's in your heart. One of the greatest misconceptions about prayer is believing that if we don't immediately see or feel a difference, then nothing happened. But the Bible teaches us that prayer is not simply an event, it's the beginning of a conversation with God. And sometimes God answers us immediately. Sometimes He answers us over time. Sometimes He changes our circumstances. Sometimes He prepares us for the circumstances we're still walking through. And many times, He's working in ways our eyes simply can't see. Think about a seed. The moment it's planted, nothing above the ground looks different. If you judge by what you could see, you might assume nothing happened. But beneath the surface, life has already begun. Roots are forming. Growth has started. Something is happening long before it becomes visible. God works the same way. Just because you can't see His hand doesn't mean He isn't moving. Just because you don't feel different doesn't mean He isn't at work. What if the answer you prayed for has already begun, even though you can't recognize it yet? What if God is opening doors you haven't reached yet? What if He's arranging conversations you haven't had yet? What if He's strengthening your faith for what's ahead? What if He's protecting you from something you can't see? How many prayers has God answered behind the scenes before we ever realized what He was doing? Faith grows when we trust God's work, even while it's still hidden from us. We naturally measure progress by what we can see. God measures it by what He's accomplishing. We focus on today's feelings. God sees tomorrow's purpose. We look for immediate results. God is working with eternal perspective. That's why His timing often looks different than ours. Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8 reminds us that God's thoughts are not our thoughts, and His ways are not our ways. God isn't limited by what we can understand in the moment. His faithfulness isn't determined by how we feel on any particular day. His promises remain true, whether our emotions are calm or unsettled. His presence remains constant, whether we recognize it immediately or not. Remember the prayers He's answered for you before. They remind you that the same God who was faithful then is faithful now. If you still feel the same after you pray, don't mistake that for God's silence. He heard your prayer, and he's working, even when you can't see it, even when you can't feel it. But one day, you'll look back and discover that he was moving long before you ever realized it.